Then so I was telling him all about the time.
Oh, come on now.
Yeah.
Okay, who are you two?
Well, I'm Lois Stahl, was bald,
BAAL.
AL. So this is my son Stephen, or our son Stephen. So,
And how old are you?
well, I was born October 28th, 1934, in a little farmhouse near Adrian, Minnesota, in the country. And wood-burning stove in the dining room, and a cook stove in the kitchen, and no running water. And two of my mom's sisters were there along with the doctor when I was born. And I was born, my dad had gone out to do chores that morning, and then I was born while he was out doing chores about 7:30. And then it was, at that time, they always kept people in bed for 10 days. Well, just before the 10 days were up, why my mom got sick. And she got an infection and passed away when I was 21 days old, or 20 days old. So,
Did your aunt stay with you while your mom was there in bed and help them take care of things?
yeah, my aunts did, two of my aunts, and then my grandmother, my dad's mom, was back and forth because they only lived like a mile away, or 3/4 of a mile away.
Which aunts were with you? What were their names?
I'm not sure which ones of my mom's sisters were there. Aunt Alice was one of them, but I don't know who the other one was.
Okay.
Well,
So,
but you had Bertha.
but it wasn't Aunt Bertha that was
Well,
there.
no,
I
but I'm
don't
just
think.
saying your aunts
Oh,
were Bertha
Aunt
and
Gertrude,
Gertrude.
and Aunt Bertha, and Aunt Alice. And then,
Ellis, like Ellis?
No,
ALICE.
Mm-hmm. And then I had one uncle, Virgil. That was her brother.
On that side of the family.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, it was Melvin, Walter,
And my dad,
and your
Harvey,
dad.
and then Aunt Mabel.
Mhm.
And Mabel is Doris's mother. So she was awfully quiet, but a favorite aunt. And I really didn't know my mom's side of the family real well because I don't know, my grandmother whether she felt threatened. But I can remember my grandmother and one of my aunts came to see me when I was probably 3 years old. And they just made over me and hugged me and, had to sit on their lap. And Grandma Ball was not a real demonstrative person. She didn't hug or anything like that, very seldom. And that was about the last time. My dad took me there a few times to see him. And he took Grandma along one time. Olive and I and Mildred, and we all went to see my other grandma then. And they always welcomed us with open arms. But then there was this distance, and I never knew them again until we had moved to Ellsworth. And one day I was going home from town from the post office, and this man came up beside me, was walking by me, and he started talking, and he said, "You don't know who I am, do you?" And I said, "No." And he was all really scruffy. He was a mechanic. Worked on cars, and he was all greasy. He said, "I'm your uncle." He says, "I'm your Uncle Virgil. I'm your mom's brother." And it just threw me for a little bit because I was like 12, 13. So I went home and I told my grandmother that I met my uncle. I didn't know he lived here. Yeah, that was it. But then when Christmas came that year, he had a wonderful wife. His wife was just a sweetheart. And they asked me to go along to Aunt Bertha's for Christmas. And my grandmother did let me go. I was 13 that year and had a great time, but I wasn't used to all this hugging and loving, and so that part was different for me. But no, they were very nice to me. Very loving family.
So was that the start of seeing them regularly, or did you not see them regularly still?
Didn't see them much outside of my uncle. I would ride with my uncle and aunt over to Magnolia once in a while because Grandma didn't have a car, and I wasn't allowed, we weren't hardly allowed to say anything about my mom or Aunt Bertha at home because it made my stepmom upset. So it was a different situation.
So do you feel like you had a lot of maybe anger or depression or that you really never got to deal with what had happened to your mom since you knew very little? And
No, because if you don't have it, you don't realize what you're missing till later on in life. But I guess when I would go there, it was, the more I went, the more I saw what a difference there was in how I might have been raised had I been raised by my mom's side of the family. My grandmother was a hard worker and very, the only time I saw her laugh is when her sisters would come to stay for 2-3 days. And she had an Aunt Hannah who had 10 children, and Aunt Hannah she was just something else. She was always laughing and could find something to laugh about, and she could always get Grandma to laugh, and then it was a lot of fun to have them. And let's see. No, and being on the farm too, it was just Grandma and I a lot of times, and Melvin was working, but we only lived like 3/4 of a mile or half a mile from my dad's, so I could walk up to my dad's once in a while, but usually on weekends I would go and spend a lot of times a weekend there with them, and that was always great for me.
you looked forward to going to...
Yeah, I did. I look forward to coming back home, but I look forward to going there and playing with Mildred, or seeing Mildred and playing with Ruth. Mildred used to have to work all the time, a lot of the time, but I got to sleep with her, and then we would talk, and that was fun. And I looked up to her. She was my big sister.
So what'd you talk about?
Oh,
Remember any?
No. A lot of times we talked about Ruth, how upset we would get with her because she was a little sister and she would do things that would aggravate us, you know. But Mildred had a couple of comic books stashed underneath the mattress, and we'd get them and look at them, or she'd tell me stories.
Do you remember the comics books were? Yeah.
Betty and Veronica was one.
Oh really? Okay, so
Yeah.
Archie?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Back then yet?
Oh yes.
Really?
Old ones. And I guess the one thing that I realized as I got older and after my kids have grown up, when you have time to think back and realize that words just can hurt so bad sometimes, and how as grown-ups we don't always think of that, because I used to want to go to my aunt and uncle or my dad's, and my grandmother would say, "Oh, you don't want to go now, they don't want to see you coming again." And that has stuck with me all these years. One time I was working when we had the other little house down the street here and over a block. Why, Daryl would go, and they were friends of ours. And I had to go through, I was painting upstairs in the kids' room, and I had to do some patching on the wall. And I made a trip to the lumberyard a couple of times, and I was on my third trip down to get something. And Daryl was up above moving lumber. And he said, "What, you again?" And I turned around and I went home, and I didn't go back to the lumberyard for 3 years. And you know, I didn't think about it at the time, but now I know why. And to this day, if somebody said, "You again?" I'm gone. So it's just, you got to really watch what you say to the kids, especially when you say it over and over and over.
But you started to realize that it wasn't necessarily that they meant it, you know, later, like with Daryl and stuff, that he probably didn't mean it, that he didn't want
No,
to see
I
you, but-
know he probably was just kidding, you know, but it's so deep ingrained in you that, you know,
Yeah.
and to this day, I've gotten over a lot of it, but to this day, there's still a little of it there. So it's just, but no, and then about my life when I was younger in Ellsworth, why we had my girlfriends at school. I mean, back then we ran around with girls and boys all in, you know, and a lot of us would go roller skating. We'd put on our roller skates after school and roller skate the streets of Ellsworth. And that was a lot of fun. Those were the most fun times for me.